Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Ain't a Boss, the only leadership podcast for highly stressed out students. My name is Aeron, and joining me today on this part 3 of the Beyond the Resume series is none other than my partner, JR. How are you, JR?
All right, here we go again. Yes, I'm doing well, Aaron.
Woo!
This is episode 5, by the way, just for people
Yeah.
who are tracking. Yeah.
So, how's life, JR? How's leadership?
Yes, life's good. I continue to lead meetings, normal work, and mentor students.
On my side, I've been great as well. It's actually my summer, but work doesn't
Yep.
stop during breaks.
For sure.
There's always opportunities to lead, and I myself have decided to grab those opportunities, maybe see some
Yeah.
growth as well during
Yeah,
the
knowing
summer.
you,
Then-
I think you're a person who can't be, what's the word? You should always be doing something.
oh yeah. But definitely some rest is on the horizon for me. Let's see when that
Oh,
comes though.
you should do that. You should do that.
All right. So in the previous parts of this Beyond the Resume series, we talked about answering some specific questions around motivation. So for part 1, we answered why do I lead? And for part 2, we answered the question, are my motivations wrong? So in this episode, we'll be talking about and answering rather a question that's really close to our heart. Perhaps this is the closest one to our hearts among all the 3 questions we're going to answer in this series. And the question we'll be answering is actually, how do I keep myself motivated? Sound familiar, JR?
That's a $1 million question, I guess. Even myself, I would ask
Indeed.
myself.
All right. So specifically, we'll be talking about the orientations, the interplay between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation,
Yep.
all those combinations that may help us to keep ourselves motivated. And we'll also be sharing some practical tips for us to follow in our journey towards staying motivated, staying high in spirit, or at least keeping ourselves centered
Yeah.
on why we're doing this leadership in the first place.
Yeah, at least I think it's good for us to establish, at least from the past session or episode rather, that some people might think, oh, this motivation is better than the other. We're not saying that, like, say, intrinsic motivation
Yeah.
will always be better than extrinsic motivation. I think having those kinds of motivations would help us as long as we know their place. And it's important for us to be aware of these motivations so that we can actually lead well. So we're asking ourselves, like, okay, if I'm going to be in leadership position, would the resume be enough motivation for me to do that? Of course, we said, like, it's
Yeah.
probably not enough. You need some more so that you can actually lead well. And in fact, if you have motivations, other motivations to lead well, your whatever you're leading, organizations or other groups, projects, whatever, then
Right.
you'll actually be, if you're doing a good job there, then most likely you'll have a better look of your resume in your resume because you're actually quite successful and you did really, really well in your leadership roles. So yeah, am I making sense?
Yeah. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
Actually, I was thinking about what you were saying. And the key word that I find in this episode for our viewers is actually the word balance.
Yep.
Balancing our motivations. As simple as it may sound, I guess it's a very good foundation to
Right.
what we're going to talk about today in this episode, in this
Yes.
part 3 of our Beyond the Resume series.
Yep. If we're gonna answer the
Right?
question,
So,
if you're gonna answer the question, how do I keep myself motivated? I think it would be important for us to say, okay, so what's that state? All right. So I'm gonna share with you basically 3 orientations towards a certain task or a certain goal that would somehow give you an indication whether you're actually motivated or not. Okay. So from Ryan and Desi study on self-determination, we'll put it in the show notes. There are 3 types of orientation towards this motivation or towards a certain goal, whether to know if you're motivated or not. The first one is the impersonal orientation. It's basically you're saying you're not motivated, mainly because you have different needs from the environment that you're part of, maybe in your group or in your team. You're not getting that. And then you would feel or you would think that you're incompetent, you're unlovable, and therefore you're not fit for that goal. Therefore, you don't have intentions actually to behave in a certain way to reach that goal. So basically, you can say that most likely in this situation, you're not motivated, you're amotivated. So that's impersonal orientation. Okay. Others would have like what we call controlled orientation. Somehow they're being pressured by an environment to act this way, to do this way, but it's not quite integrated inside. So we can say like you're kind of forced to do this, but you haven't really gotten enough reason to convince yourself that you should be doing this.
Yeah.
So that's controlled motivation. You just know that you need to do that, and then you're basically like plowing yourself. But what we want to reach actually is what we call the autonomous orientation. So basically, you're self-determined. You have a sense of choice, and you're satisfied knowing that you can make choices depending on your motivations. You have self-internalized extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. It's integrated in you that you can actually make a choice and say, I want this, I know I should do this, but I can actually respond in this way towards the goal.
Yeah.
So whatever my environment would tell me, it's integrated within me. So that's what you call the autonomous orientation. So basically, this is a state where you can say, I have balanced orientation or I have a balanced motivation. I see the rewards, I see the extrinsic factors. I also see the value, the importance, what's in it for me. And therefore, that would drive me. I can make choices that would help me move forward with my goal.
Yeah.
So that's that's where we want to be. So it's a seesaw imagery. Like you're able to balance that within you.
Seesaw effect.
Yes. Okay, so that's where we want to go. So the question is, how do we get there, right?
So I'm actually very intrigued about those three orientations that you mentioned. And that's because I see them also in my leadership experience, either in the past or even some I'm currently experiencing. So for that impersonal orientation, the best thing I can describe it is studying for a test for a subject that I don't really like. And I feel no attachment to it whatsoever. So I just wake up, okay, time to study, but I actually don't. So for the controlled orientation, it's very similar to the
I think
college.
a lot of people can relate to that anyway. I don't think you're alone in that situation.
Fighting. So for the controlled orientation, what I can actually think of is my college in particular. Sometimes we have that tendency to perform well, or all the time we have the tendency to want to perform well, get a good job, build up a resume through organizational achievements or roles, leadership positions. But sometimes there's that detachment of personal endorsement, like asking yourself, do I want to do this in the first place, or am I just forced to comply with that corporate culture in mind? And I think that's the best way I can put that concretely. But what's lacking for that, just like what you mentioned earlier, is that autonomy, that personal endorsement, that gratification and choice to actually do this.
Yes.
Funnily enough, one part or one example that comes to mind is my social work actually. I mentioned earlier that I mentioned in past episodes that I'm part of a social outreach up to now. And maybe that's one really concrete way to say that I have a choice. I want to lead in this aspect, and I have the resources to say, yes, I'm doing it not just for the internal motivation's sake, but also for external motivators too. So I want to be
Yeah.
excellent in that aspect because I endorse it on my free will.
Yeah, but it's also like somehow uh, there's an expectation for you guys to do something like that. But it
Yeah,
happened also that you actually want to do it, and therefore those combinations you can fully integrate them within yourself, and therefore you can make a choice towards that. So sometimes you won't feel like it, that I don't want to
yeah,
go there, or I don't want to have meetings. But like, hey, it's important to me, and my people, they're expecting us to actually be there, so might as well. But you can easily
do
gather
it.
that it becomes more
Yeah,
natural for you. That's where we want to go. That's like a seesaw again, as we've said. That's like a seesaw imagery that we're able to balance them and fully integrate them within us. And it's important for us to realize that in a seesaw, there's a lever, or some people would say lever, but what I would call it lever. And so we need that. We need leverage for those motivations. And I think we have some 3 tips or 3 ways that we can leverage different motivations so that we can keep ourselves going
let's get right
and
into it.
motivated. All right. Yeah. So we thought that it would be good for us to actually be very specific here in this situation. So we kind of just like pick out, or at least like I picked out certain scenarios that's quite common for many student leaders, or for many
Yeah.
leaders in general, in terms of motivation. And then we're gonna leverage it, or at least we're gonna couple it with other motivations that will help them, process it with them themselves. And I hope that will help them, okay? So one situation is a lot of leaders would just look at their position as if they're just about to solve problems. In an organization, their motivation is like, okay, something's not right, we gotta fix that, let's solve that. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you identify
For sure.
with that? Yeah.
For
So
sure.
we want, yeah.
Yeah. Pretty much all of my organizations deal with that. Problem solving is what we're supposed to do and what we want to do. Yeah.
Right. So, what we want to do is leverage problem solving with growth mindset. Okay. So, a lot of people would just like look at problems and say it's either it's too hard for me, it's not within the range of my expertise, might as well not handle that. Let's avoid it. Or they might look at a problem and say like, oh, this is too easy a task and I can just fix this. And then that's it. Is this just what I'm about to, is this just what I'm about here in my role? So then they get
Yeah.
bored, okay? So, but if we actually leverage it with growth mindset and say, okay, if this task or if this problem is too hard for you, then how can you improve in this area? And what learning can you do so that you can address this problem? What are the resources that's available for you? If you don't have that, then how can you get that resource? Talk to
Yeah.
your team or whatever. Do whatever you need to actually fulfill that. Then you'll realize it's not just about you who's actually facing that problem. You got a whole team to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So it's just owning up to it by really just looking for solutions, continue to look for solutions for your growth and for the growth of others.
Exactly. So it's not just about like, oh, I just really need to fix this problem or solve
Yeah.
a puzzle. But like, oh, this can actually help me become a better person, a better leader, or have a better team that will face this problem
Yeah.
together. If it's too hard, okay? If the opposite is true, it's too simple, then you're really gonna get bored, right? So then you
For
can
sure.
you can you can leverage it, meaning have a better motivation in facing those tasks or problems by saying, okay, how can I learn other things? If I already know this, what else do I need to learn in connection with this problem? Meaning, how can I make this challenging? How can I challenge myself so that I can actually be a better leader in this situation, even if tasks are just like, they're kind of boring. So I think that would be helpful, of course, if people would identify first, like, okay, what are the normal tasks that we do in my organization? Are they too hard for me or they're actually too
Yeah.
boring? Then have a growth mindset. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Such a thing as a Goldilocks rule. So
Wow.
a guy named James Clear, I think, yes, it's him that somehow made this rule famous. So basically saying that when someone is like doing something, it's either too hard. The tendency is like, okay, I'm not gonna do that anymore. That's just too much for me. And then, or if it's like too easy, it's like, oh, I don't want this. It's too boring. I don't want that. So the rule is, the Goldilocks rule basically is like, have a certain level of challenge, but it's not too much. So basically, it's just
Yeah.
right. It's just like his analogy is like if you're playing tennis,
Yeah.
or any sport in general, I think like, so if you're up against like, say, what, my idol, Djokovic. So if I'm playing with him and he's too good, so I'm probably just gonna be like, trashed and like and it's not gonna be fun for me. But if I
Yeah.
also play with someone who's like what, a 5-year-old, so it's not gonna motivate me either. So I need to find someone that I'm matched with in terms of ability, experience, and it's gonna be a good game. So sometimes I'm gonna lose, sometimes I'm gonna have a better edge, but it's making me actually enjoy it.
Yeah.
But it's also challenging me to somehow, okay, I'm gonna get better and I really want to like beat this guy next time. Or I don't want him to beat me. We're kinda like level. Does that make sense? So we want
Yeah.
we want those challenges, tasks, in a certain way or in a certain sense, like it's challenging us, but it's not too much.
Yeah.
That it's making us like get better at it in a healthy way with the right pace. I think you and I would agree, Aaron, for this next one. Like, would you want your people that you're leading to actually hate you? I don't think you would want that. No.
Nah. That's an
don't want
easy no.
Right. So a lot of leaders, I'd say, would be very common for them to actually seek approval.
Yeah.
Right? So like, I mean, I would want people to actually trust me, the people that I'm leading to like me in terms of like my leadership ability. Otherwise, it would be very, very hard for me to lead. I think it's
Yeah.
also the same thing for you.
For sure. It's a sense of ownership. It's a sense of pride for me as well as a leader. Because there's no I in team. And leadership entails a group of people, a team. So you gotta gain their trust in order to function well.
Right.
And I want that.
Yeah. But the problem with that is if we rely too heavily on that, then sometimes we might get confused like, okay, I want this person's approval, I want this person's approval, and then like, oh my gosh, I'm quite torn, like, what am I going to be?
So many people to win over.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So we realized that, of course, we want our people to trust us, to approve of our approaches or the way we're doing things and the way we're leading the team.
Yeah.
But we also need to leverage it. So leverage seeking approval with ownership of your leadership role. Okay? So meaning we want you as a leader to also say, this is the kind of leader I would want to be. And this is my responsibility to win my team
Yeah.
to this kind of leadership. But of course, I would also want to adjust to what they're expecting of me. All right, so there's a study here published for the Handbook of Industrial and Organizational Psychology, led by Barling and his team. This is on leadership. So I think this quote proves our point or reinforces what we're talking about. Okay, I think I sent it to you. Do you want to read it?
For sure. All right. So, according to Barling and his team, leveraging seeking approval with ownership or control is done by empowering with autonomy. So, things like encouraging decision making, fostering teamwork, competence, and feedback. And what this does is it increases commitment to the group and its overall success, and is more likely to result in positive work outcomes, achieving group goals. Yeah. So that's the quote. Pretty amazing.
Yeah. So basically, what you want to do is communicate to the people, and you want to encourage them to be part of like decision making. So that's somehow also like you are seeking their approval by involving them. But you're still saying, like, as the leader, I think this is the direction where we want to go. But what do you guys think? And do you like this? And then come up with, like, say, certain agreement or negotiation so that you can actually reach there. So in that way, you're seeking their approval, but you're also still saying, like, okay, this is how I know best that we can actually do this. What do you guys think? So that's pretty much it. I think in the meetings, sometimes leaders would be caught in this dilemma that like, okay, so, I really want to value their opinion, but forgetting that you're still the leader and you need to actually like bring out certain ways or at least like
steer them.
Yeah, exactly. A certain direction. Otherwise, your team are just like, oh, you're relying on us too much, but you're actually the one who should see the bigger picture or whatever. So then meetings would be a lot more chaotic. You don't have the direction for the meeting, so on and so forth. So I think what you can do in the meetings is come up with agenda, come up with a way to go about your meetings, communicate that, send it to your team, and then get their approval, get their thoughts, and then come up with an agreement.
Yeah. It's great that you brought that up because I was actually thinking that this kind of approach, it serves a dual purpose. So it's a double-edged sword. It allows you to exude both approachability and it also allows you to achieve, to establish your own competence because it will foster that thought that you know what you're doing, but also that you're encouraging others to say what's on their mind and for the benefit of the whole team. So it's pretty nice. Yeah. Yep.
I think, Aeron, you and I will really connect to this last one because we thought that a lot of leaders, maybe like you and I, are pretty much like so into achievements. So wanting to have this
I won't deny
and
that
that
too.
awards. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think the problem here is, again, like as we talked about last episode, is that it's not enough to just like look at achievements and as if like that's the only measure of success. And it can only go help us to like reach as far as like we're actually still interested in the awards or in the achievements, right? So we want to leverage achievements with shared vision and purpose. Okay? Leverage it with shared vision and purpose. What do I mean by that? Okay. So we realize that sometimes achieving something would be meaningless already, especially if you've actually quite like achieved a lot already. And I mean, I think for many athletes, that's kind of like the same for them. Like once they
Set for
reach
life.
like what an
Yeah.
Olympic gold medal, and then it's like, okay, what else is there to? Yeah. So what else is there to achieve? So sometimes we hit that part, and then we lose
Yeah.
vision in terms of like why is this important still, so on and so forth. Okay. So when that happens, it would be good for us to realize that I need to access within me a certain sense that it is important to achieve these things. And then we also need help, or we also need to realize that other people, this is also important for them. And we need to remind each other, why is this thing, like this
Going.
achievement,
Yeah.
worth actually
Yeah. Pretty
getting
clear.
or aiming for? Yeah. Does that make sense? So how
Well,
do you see that?
At the
how do you
start
see
of
this
every project or
experience?
every role, we tend to set our KPIs. We've been saying this a lot in the previous episodes, our metrics, and it's very important for us to buy in, the whole team to buy in, the reason behind why those metrics were founded in the first place. So kind of the overall long-term goal, how it contributes to the organization as a whole. For example, getting attendees, I mentioned earlier, how does that contribute to the success of the project? And then in turn,
Yeah.
how does the success of the project contribute to the success or the image of the organization as a whole? So I guess that's where it comes in my leadership
Right.
experience. It's a very common thing, I would say, in college students or in organizational positions that we find ourselves.
And I think I can't emphasize enough
Yeah.
that it's the shared vision is very important, because sometimes we might lose it as leaders. And but if we're actually paying attention, like why is this important to my
Yeah.
team, then we realize what's
Right.
important to them. Then reminds us like, oh yeah, that's like okay. Therefore, let's keep on getting
Yeah.
this. Let's try to do better, achieve our target, or even like
Yeah.
beyond that. Now, because like this really matters to my team, and now it matters to me as well.
Yeah.
at
And
this
just to
particular
add to
time,
that,
even if sometimes like
just to
oh,
add
I
to
don't-
that, we have this thing in
I'm
organizations.
having a hard time. Yeah.
I know you know this. Like we have those core pillars or core foundation, core visions that we have, and oftentimes this gets easily lost in the nitty gritty work
Yep.
that we do in the everyday menial tasks. Sometimes
Correct.
it gets
Correct.
lost somewhere in that work, and it's really good to remind each other or to remind the team from a leadership aspect that here's what we stand for. Here's why we joined this organization. Here's why we work in the first place, and if we do things towards that goal, achievements will come along. So we want to be excellent in that sense, but we want to also be anchored in our core principles in achieving those kinds of things.
Yep. So there's a psychologist named Shamir and and the team. This is like 1993, but even if it's dated, I think it still makes sense, you know. So
Yeah.
they published a study on the motivational effects of charismatic leadership, and there's a quote here, and I just like to read it. Associating important values and purpose with a task may increase its meaningfulness because it helps one identify with the work, and thus it may contribute positively to their self-concept. That is, continuing the quote, when followers believe that work goals are compatible with their own values, they are more likely to engage in self-regulated behavior. By emphasizing shared goals and by communicating a shared vision, a sense of togetherness and belongingness among a team is fostered.
Right.
So I think I don't think we need to expound so much on that. We've been saying we've been trying to prove a point, and I think this quote just
Sums it up.
speaks more. Yeah, sums it up. Okay, so there you go, Aaron. Of course, there's a ton of combinations that we can do, but I think the principle, I think that's what we really want to
Yeah.
share. So those three scenarios, I think that would help our listeners to somehow like look at their own motivations against the tasks or projects
Yeah.
that they have, and then say, okay, I just really need to leverage this with
Yeah.
something that would also boost and then somehow help me actually
Yeah.
decide, come up with like integrate all those motivations within myself and then decide to actually do that. So I think I really hope that that would help
Yeah.
them. In my own experience, that really helped me also do certain tasks or projects. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Getting to that autonomous orientation really needs a lot of practice and, leveraging, as what we talked about earlier.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
on that point, I feel like it's very important to ask a question. And this question is based because leadership is a long, long, winding journey, if not a lifelong
Oh,
journey
tell
for
me
many
about
of
it.
us. Yeah. So, throughout that process, how do we actually keep ourselves motivated? How do we manage to use that seesaw imagery in our minds
Yeah.
along the way?
Yeah. Oh, well, if we ask ourselves, like, okay, how to keep ourselves motivated? So basically, learn how to leverage certain motivations. But how do you do that exactly? Then, because as you said, we need some practice, then maybe we can share some practical tips.
Yeah, for
Okay,
sure.
so one thing that it's important is your motivations should be manifested in habits. So one tip is build habits that would help you be motivated. Okay, so meaning you really need to decide that I'm gonna do this simple thing that would reveal or manifest my motivation. Like for me, in terms of like achievement, and I want to have like shared vision. So the habit that I do with my team is like, okay, why is this important to you? Why is this important to you? Or is it this is worth it? Like having X number of attendees in our events. Like, why is this important? Why is this worth it? Having this kind of metric system. I think that just helps me be reminded. So I think that's one habit also that people could do. Okay.
Practice. Yeah.
All right. Second is be patient and therefore realize that you're not always gonna get it right. So sometimes you'll realize like, oh my gosh, that was my motivations are wrong, or that was not enough. I thought it's gonna make me do things smoothly, but I'm really having a slump and I can't do it. Prepare for setbacks. So that's one second practical tip. Remember that you're a human being and therefore you can make mistakes and that you're not always gonna get it right. So relax, learn from your mistakes, and then be honest that sometimes you don't have the motivation. You can't just force yourself. You're not always like in your optimal game. And it's okay. As long as you're learning and as long as you're preparing yourself for that. And say like, okay, I'm prepared for this. This happens. But I'm not gonna let this like destroy me or completely stop me from doing the things that I need to do.
Yeah.
Are you a perfect person, Aaron?
I want to say yes, but the people around me won't say that too. And rather to our previous discussion, like leveraging. Sometimes on those days, you just need that extra validation from the people you're working with or from yourself actually.
Yeah.
To say that my motivations are actually correct. I'm just faltering a bit, but they're still on the right track. So speaking of validation, I guess that's a good segue to the third and final tip that we have for us to
Yes.
keep ourselves motivated. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And that would be celebrate wins. Okay.
Woo.
And I think it would be very important to have like certain periods that you're really gonna make sure you're gonna celebrate those wins. Again, a guy like you and me would think, okay, so what are our achievements? What are our like success moments? Things like that. But sometimes they don't come in achievements or in standards that we've met or awards. And then we'll say like, oh, okay, so there are no wins to celebrate. I think that's not quite true, because there are a lot of wins if we look hard enough that come in different forms and in different ways. So even if like you totally flopped it or like botched a certain project, but if you look hard enough, there are certain wins that are still worth celebrating.
Yeah.
So I think in this way, you will be forced to look for other things that are actually good, that you'll realize, oh, these are actually good things that motivate me. I just didn't realize it because I was too fixated on like the obvious ones. So I think that will also help you as a leader.
Yeah.
Leverage different motivations. Yeah.
All right, so that's actually a wrap for this episode and
Yes.
for the Beyond the Resume series as a whole. So, wow, lots of things that I've learned. But just to reiterate what we said earlier, I think one really nice takeaway that I had from this episode was the seesaw image in my mind,
Right.
and specifically for the first practical way or for us to leverage. So that's problem solving with growth mindset is to add that spice or add some flair in how you actually solve problems in the sense that it will help us lead ourselves to growing. So I guess that's one pretty practical tip that I'd take from this episode, and one way actually that's very easy to apply in my day-to-day life, my day-to-day leadership. So adding some flair, adding some pizzazz, as the genie in Aladdin would say, some pizzazz. Oh, yeah. Oh, I can't sing. But yeah.
It's all right. It's
How
all right.
about you?
Yes. So, of course, I'm gonna go back to like looking at the whole series. We're talking about motivation. One thing, really, for me is it's important that I'm just aware of my motivations.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily wrong, but it's good for me to ask, are these enough for me to actually keep myself going, to keep myself, to keep on keeping on? Because there will really be obstacles along the way, internally or externally. Am I ready to face them? And it's okay for me to realize that there are certain things that would motivate me over other things. The question is, are they enough?
Yeah.
So as I've
Yeah.
said, I think that's quite pretty helpful for me. Even, in this past months while we were preparing for this series and, with our shoots and all, somehow that's actually helped me a lot.
Yeah.
That just self-awareness. And then when I wake up in the morning and say like, look at my things to do and say like, okay, we got this. And now, as we talked about it, I realize that, of course, I've been doing it, but it's just good for me to, okay, I have words for that. Or now there's actually a concept that I can say, okay, it's good to know that I'm somehow doing things, I'm on the right track when I look at
Yeah.
motivations. I'm able to actually put them together, help me process it within myself. And
Yeah.
that's it. Let's do a good job.
Come-
Yeah.
Come to think of it, getting some time to just sit and evaluate yourself, your motivations, that's something that is really underrated. And I think it's worth doing moving forward. Not just for me as a guilty party
Yeah.
who often doesn't do that.
Right.
But I guess for leaders in general, or even those who just want to become
Yeah.
better at what they're doing,
For sure.
understanding themselves, take some time to sit down, evaluate why you're doing this in the first place, and let that fuel you moving forward. So as long as you're on the right track.
Yep. And I hope that at the end, of course, like at the end of the series, They have certain decisions to make so that they can actually keep themselves motivated. It's important that you guys have like those habits, that preparedness of like reality check, and then be able
Celebrating.
to celebrate wins. So that's a wrap. That's great. That was a good series.
For
I
sure.
love doing that. Yeah.
I enjoyed it as well. Learned a lot too.
Okay. All right. So, guys, that's it. That's our Beyond the Resume series. I hope you enjoy that. There's a lot of things that you can learn, and look at the show notes for more references. And watch out for more episodes. And we're really preparing for many good things to come in the next episodes.
Right? Like what JR said, this Beyond the Resume series may be over in just 3 parts, but the Ain't a Boss podcast will always be here for you guys. Just to share some thoughts. We're always gonna be here, and we're looking forward to making more content about relevant leadership topics and leadership situations.
There you go, friends. I really enjoyed that series, the Beyond the Resume. So we answer the questions. How do I lead? Are my motivations strong? And how do I keep myself motivated? I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. And I hope this series also helps you in your own leadership role and responsibilities. So if you have questions, we're ready to answer them. I hope we are, but I think we're gonna prepare and study hard for that. And so send in your questions. You can see at the show notes how to send your questions in, and we'll be glad to answer them.
Yeah, so to catch more of our episodes about leadership, make sure to follow us on Spotify, subscribe to us on YouTube, or watch out for us wherever you may get your podcast. Again, this has been Aeron. With me is JR. And this has been Ain't a Boss, the only leadership podcast for highly stressed out students. Bye-bye.